Hello and welcome everybody to Power for Parkinson's Powerful People interview series. And I'm really excited today to share two really special people who are extremely creative. So I'd like to introduce to you. So we have Amparo Garcia-Crow with us today and Arthur Shane uh, from California. Amparo's here in Austin, Texas. And they have quite a exciting background and stories to tell us today. And Amparo has been a writer, she's a musician, she is a storyteller. She's done a number of creative projects throughout her entire life. And you're going to learn a lot about her today. And Arthur as well. Arthur is a composer, a music director. He's been an educator for many years. I know the two of you have worked together and on this project for quite some time that we're going to talk about. And Arthur has been, worked on Disney projects. He's worked on other IMAX recordings, and he's got an extensive biography. And today, the main reason we decided to get together is because they have worked on a new play or musical called Appeal, a new American musical of Mexican descent. And this is going to be performed in Austin, Texas over the next couple weekends at the Austin Community College. And we're just really excited to have you on to learn about your process and learn about the production. And maybe I can just start it off because I know you two have known each other for a while now, right?
Yeah.
1990s.
Since when?
1990s.
Yeah. And actually, I met you. Yeah, it was about 92, wasn't it? Around then, I think.
We played together in the same band. Ampy was leading the band with her then husband, David Rose. And it was quite a heady time. I think we were all at the peak of our abilities, but our understanding had to catch up some years later, I think, continuing work on the projects. It feels very much now like a child leaving home, which I'm experiencing with my own daughters. Now with a play too, Etude, and so much for that. But there is the necessary letting go of it. And that's something I think that I know I'm experiencing. Ampy, I can tell by that deeply rooted smile that she's, feeling something of this certainly too. But she's had a much more prolific career, which I think is the pay for living with your full heart open to what comes your way. There's more risk and there's more gain. So we're experiencing different modalities of what it's like to be a creative person, whatever that means, right? But there's different ways that people come out of that. And the question is what comes next? But we're still at the point where there's still a little bit of wiggle room to adjust the project, to adjust your expectations of the actors and performers, and musicians, and in yourself too. Your own, how are you meeting the challenges which do change, over time. Let me turn it back over to Ampy just to say one thing that it's really right now I think of myself more as a decomposer, frankly, than a composer. Because it's closer to what I'm experiencing every day. And I'm thinking like, maybe a comedy workshop or something out of music might be helpful. I might, be a way to work through and onto the next plateau. Ampy?
Yeah, well, what I've always appreciated about you, Artie, even when we first met, because at that point my son was a toddler, if you remember, a very
Yeah,
young
yeah.
boy, and he's gone on to have a big music career, which has been very sweet because he remembers, because he would be in our rehearsals listening and contributing, and even in the old cassette tapes when we're just making music up as a band, you can hear him in the back chiming in, right? It's very, very sweet. Um, but what I always appreciated, because I did have a theatrical, I was a director, actor, dancer. I was acting like a musician, meaning I don't have any training. I'm a poet, and my thing was always coming up with ideas and lyrics, and knowing that someone as masterful as you, Artie, could come in and enliven that. And what I love, Nina, that Artie was so spectacular at is that I could tell him, okay, I hear this as a ballad, or I hear this as an old jazz standard, but then it turns into a 60s twist in the middle of it. And we're trying to express a heartache about a relationship that worked. With all the irony intact, you know. And he would come up with this incredible melodies, which then I could play because I could improvise melodies with my voice, but I never had official training. And like I said, he was very respectful and patient. And I think you have such a great sense of humor. You have like this old comedic vaudeville like heart about things. So it was fun to throw things at you, and he would come up with instant responses, which I always appreciated.
Yeah.
So you've been working together or known each other since the 90s. And when you started, maybe it'd be a good place to start just giving a summary about Appeal.
This is a gentleman. Interestingly enough, it was when I was working in Los Angeles with Artie, and my partner David and my little boy were living there together, that I first heard about Gus Garcia, because I had had a party and one of my Texans friends showed up, and we were brainstorming about how to find a theatrical subject that I could write a play and ideally mix music with it. I wasn't going to say musical because, again, I felt a little unable to meet that kind of standard at the time. But he mentioned, hey, have you ever heard about the attorney from Texas named Gus Garcia? He was the first Mexican American to argue a case in front of the Supreme Court, which is a big deal, especially in the 50s, because it was such a racist time, particularly in Texas, with, you know, signs in little towns still said, no Mexicans, Negroes, or dogs allowed. I mean, you could still find those crazy signs in places. And so the fact that this gentleman could come from nowhere, Texas, and end up on the Supreme Court stage of sorts caught my attention immediately. So I said, well, tell me more. And we tried to find as much research as we could. And I couldn't find much other than he had died homeless and supposedly on a park bench somewhere in San Antonio. Now, since then, it wasn't a park bench. I have discovered through some historians and some attorneys that also consider him as a hero, that he died on a bench at at a friend's house that owned the farmers market in San Antonio. But the fact that he still had to be sleeping on somebody's bench in the middle of nowhere, how he could reach such grandeur and such a fall, right? That's so theatrical in terms of the tragedies of the Greek proportion, right? So I was immediately interested and started to create what I could of the story even then. And Artie, you remember this. This thing has been so many incarnations. It was originally called The Unknown Soldier because I didn't even know the story. Then called La Carpa Garcia because of the tent show that I discovered that could become a metaphor of his life, which were these old vaudeville Mexican American tent shows for poor people that couldn't afford to go to the fancy theaters. They could do them in farms and things like that. So then it went through that name, and then Appeal didn't have. At some point, Artie, do you remember the workshop we did in New York at Because we were invited as artists to develop another musical, but whenever Artie and I could be in the same town, we would work on everything.
So since this process started such a long time ago, and now it's like you finally have been able to, like you said, let your child go. I know both of you have Parkinson's, and I'm curious if that has impacted your process, changed, like led you to this moment.
Yeah, I would love to hear, particularly Artie, because I'm not sure when your diagnosis happened, Artie, but it was earlier than mine, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where to begin? Parkinson's is a full body experience and then some. I was diagnosed for my youngest daughter, so about 19 years ago, maybe 20 years, thereabouts. So what began as just a mild tremor from here we go, mild tremor, take one.
Yeah.
Gradually worked its way from top to bottom, very fastidious, and it's a very difficult thing to experience. It's also difficult to talk about. I'm glad that it's sort of come up here. I don't want to co-opt or co-opt the thing by gnarly disease, but it is part of your surroundings and your awareness. I can't think of any of the great stories from that. There have been a few, but it's like I said, it's decomposer, as opposed to taking your time doing it. Is the most resonant thing I can say about it. Doesn't really inform too much of my working, except I can't get the hand to really speak the way it should or used to. So you have to find another way to speak, but smile with your eyes, all these other things, which I'm not very good at, but I have a lot of room to try and develop.
Well, you're on our channel. You're speaking mostly to people with Parkinson's or have a relationship with Parkinson's. So, and I think that that's really important to share, and that it sounds as if, you have found new ways to show your creativity.
Yeah, well,
Even though you say you're decomposing, you've been able to
yeah. Well,
compose and continue.
All right. Well, Artie and I, the last time I saw Artie and we were in the same town, he came to Austin because we were working on the world premiere of a musical called Strip. And that was the one we actually did develop in New York City as special guest artist of Nabby Minds, which has always been one of my most favorite performance groups in New York since I started studying the theater. So it was a real amazing accomplishment to be invited while a couple of the original artistic directors were still alive to come there and really work on an idea from inception. And so that was something that we did, and that's the last time I saw you, Artie. And I think you had just gotten it's called DMS. Is that what it's called?
what was it?
Deep Brains, DBS.
Yeah, deep brain.
Yes, you had just received it, so you were functioning at this extraordinary energetic level, remember?
Yeah, I do, because that was the last time I was just functioning at that height of. It really was a good time. I had the surgery behind me. It wasn't doing anything too scary, except my hairline, which has changed. But it's things gradually, from this kind of apogee of if you look at the progress of the process, it seems very much like a bell curve. You have accumulation gradually, and then you hit a couple of crises or challenge points, and those high, connected ports or parts becomes a little harder to connect the dots, to speak the syllables into words, to weave each lyric to a melody, whatever it is you're doing, you're you're calling on abilities that you've had questioned, and you may yourself have come to some answers that direct you in other ways too. You can't assume that there won't be hostages taken in the process, of re-envisioning your creativity and re-envisioning just your way, your approach to life in general. It doesn't have to be this stage or microphone.
So when you say the metaphor hostages, can you clarify? Because already, see, Nina, this is a perfect example when Artie and I have a conversation. The lyricist in me already wants to make a song about the hostage takeover of our inner life, right? Or our awareness or our life as it was. But I was curious, can you tell me more what specifically that metaphor is referring to?
Absolutely not. Totally random process.
All right, so then I could run away with the song.
Think a little bit about Ned Ludd. We all know
At what?
Ned Ludd. He was the Luddite.
But I think, but wouldn't we agree that this time, what's been very different for us, Nina, and he and I spoke about this last week briefly on the phone, is that normally any excuse to suddenly have a venue, because venues were always bottom line, and I'm sure they are even for Power for Parkinsons. We gotta find the location in which to bring people together. I would capitalize on that as an artist because I wanted to take full advantage of the time given. And so I always like being the director producer of these events. And this is, I mean, I've had people license my work that are not musicals and plays in different parts of the country. And I don't necessarily have to see those productions. But I'm always interested in world premieres because it's the beginning of a new process, even though it looks like, oh, it must be done. For me, nothing is ever done as far as creativity goes. It could always be better. It could always be different. But I like to have my fingers in it if I can. And this is one time. It's not like Highland Mall is that far from my house.
Yeah.
But I stayed away from it altogether. And of course, Artie's not able or not wanting to travel at this time, so he's not here either. Because he and I, like mad professors, love being in the laboratory.
Yes.
Have jumped at it again. And of course, his musicality is so superior that what he brings to he liked to be in the orchestra if he could every time, be the conductor. And we're not doing that this time.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be able to watch it from a videotape that ACC will make available to him of some performance, maybe and then I will go probably at least once a week while it's up, I hope. So I get to be a tourist of our own work and go, oh, what were they thinking? Like, oh no, because now it's other minds taking full advantage. And even in one of the one run through that I did see, it was a rough run through because you can imagine it's like singing and dancing, and some of them have never danced because it's a training.
Yeah.
Students. Is that there were a lot of things that I would have nipped and tucked, or I would have gone and done workshops on, but instead I had to be like a little innocent child and just get enchanted by what was going on as is, for good, bad, or worse. It's delightful, just as it is, and that's been very sweet.
Well, it seems, well, I think that's really interesting just to have that new perspective. And I know you're I know you, and I know how you tell stories, and you're very open to many different ideas. So I think that's really unique. I was thinking about the fact that, what the story is about and about the racism, about the fact that Gus Garcia did. and, the relevance to today also.
Well, it's so timely right now with the politics going on in the world and the division. It's like we didn't get anywhere, sadly, as much as, the anthem of the song that's one of my favorite songs that Artie and I created, which ends the musical, um, is an anthem song about his last appeal, speaking to the Supreme Court. And that's almost like, even if nothing else works, if that one song can capture what I think we did there together, it captures the hope, the highest hope, and the sadness of what it took to get there for so many people. And the fact that this man was so ahead of his time, and he died when he was 47.
Wow, so
And
young.
the irony that, he was a good friend of JFK, the young JFK at that point. But as a pro bono civil rights attorney, you don't make a lot of money. so,
Right?
so he died without any himself. And of course, he was dealing with alcohol addiction at that point. And so I've had some people from our Mexican American community express some concern that they are concerned that it kind of paints him in a less than positive way. And we're going to have a discussion. They're going to show up on Sunday. These are attorneys and judges and some of the women Latin groups that I'm part of in town. And they want to talk informally afterwards about how we revise history, for better or worse. And it's a great discussion to have because as artists, and I'm sure Artie would chime in with me, we're not invested in the politics. It's not that we don't have our own personal politics, but for me, and Artie could tell me otherwise if he feels differently, but for me, it's about the human spirit. Because I don't see his alcohol addiction as a character flaw. I see it as him in pain and trying to deal with an impossible situation at the time. I mean, people were so horrible, both around him and the environment of the politic at that point, but also his own community because they felt ashamed. Like when he died that way, they didn't even want to talk about it. So his legacy almost died with him for many years, frankly. And I had his daughter, because that's one of my favorite songs that Art and I wrote together too, called Don't Talk to Strangers. His daughter, who I think passed away a few years ago, was an attorney as well, but she got separated from him as a preteen, and the mother did not allow him to have any contact with her. So she contacted me out of the blue and said, because she was a UT alumni as well, and she contacted me and said, the law school at UT, where he had graduated from at one point, wants to celebrate his life, but you know more about my father than I did. Do you mind having a conversation with him? I said, well, I'm very honored and I'll do my best. Absolutely. But then sadly, she calls me a couple of weeks later and says, well, they changed their mind. I said, they changed their mind about, oh, you mean having a conversation with me? She said, no. They're not going to honor his life because they found out how he died. Oh my God, that made me so sad and angry because I thought, alcohol addiction is a disease. It doesn't take away from his grand accomplishments. So that's the sort of thing that you're dealing with in the story.
Yeah. Well, looks like you bring up a lot of, it's part of the human condition.
Right.
It's important that people think about it.
Yeah, and the human condition, Artie, I don't think I've ever said this to Artie, because I was in denial for so long, Nina, about my Parkinson's diagnosis, because I refused to accept it for a few years, actually, because I kept working so hard to deal with what I was finding out through holistic doctors was the cause in my case of the Parkinson's. That Artie had got to the point to where I was in so much denial that I didn't even want to talk to Artie because it made me scared. And I, and I felt triply worse for that feeling because I adore and love him so much. And I thought, okay, I'm in a very bad place. I really got to work through this. And that's what I'm working through now because I'm working on a memoir. And I think I mentioned to you, Artie, I had played with the idea of a show called The One Woman Parkinsons Show. And I have a couple of friends that are musicians that have Parkinson's, and they would be my band. And maybe you already would come at that point and be part of it too. So.
Oh,
Back down there very soon. As musicals, one of the big questions when you see musicals, why are these people standing on stage and singing at me? They're singing at you full on. Why are they doing that? And in a well-written play, it's seamless. You never notice they go into song and back into the scene, as opposed to just kind of a, you know, just a big show song, which I've done too, and they're fun, you know. But basically, the question: why are they singing, particularly more exposed, you know, ballad lines? And why are they really up there? I guess it's a question as a director you probably face as well, more directly related to the character development that's evident in your pieces. In the show, I'll talk for a minute about La Carpa and some of the mechanisms going on in the show and how we approach the music specifically, and specifically the role of the La Carpa, the tent show, right? It was a device that allowed us to kind of hold the mirror to any facet of the show or the drama that we chose to. In other words, Oh, the Bull Never Had a Chance, there's some unusual, strange titles, but it allowed us to kind of use this as a device that we could create a, you know, coming back to the question, why are these people singing at me, right? They're singing at you because they can't get into your head any other way. Although, give you some updates on Parkinson's, they have some new ways that are not encouraging. That's personal business. So the Carpers come together as the first, I don't know, we're in church departed many times. Ampy originally had like a Pilobulus bus that the performers formed, you know, all of the furniture and the rolling machines and all these other things. And so we were able to go from, you know, Urzat's bullfighting music, very Castilian kind of, you know, thing. Some of you have to find something to put, you know. So we did a chord progression and a mode that sounds very, you know, good through that, even though, you know, it's a necessary. Well, we found it necessary anyway. Departure from the normal reality of time and place, which happens in any show, you know. The other numbers in the show is ripe. It needs the picking, and you know, I see the copyright is listed as like 1999, which means we got our lifespan plus 75 years ahead. But I'm always amazed when you see something that has legs that lasted so long, you know,
wow.
without at the same time. So
that's when you wrote the music?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Most of it wrote
earlier
in the century, you know, but
hard to believe it's a century, a different century.
Yeah. So we were able to span the bridge, and also just to use the Carper as a device, like a time machine. You know, you could look at it from this way, that way, and come through it. So I kind of know why they're singing at me at this, you know, at this point, but it's a valid question. I think we could ask some questions at the, you know, meetings.
Well, I think one thing, I'm not sure that we quite told the audience what a well, you mentioned it, but the carpus. Can
Yes,
you
they
just
were,
give like a little, I know you said it's about traveling tent variety shows,
yeah, they were,
right?
they
And
originated,
you use that device
yes, they originated
in this play.
yeah, they originated in Mexico. They're basically clown family, and they were self-trained. They were quite like down home Circus Soleil, like 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 using clotheslines for their tricks.
Yeah.
And at some point, they came through the border of Texas. And I had one student at the University of Texas when I was first workshopping it, when I was a professor there, because again, I had a venue and an opportunity at UT to play. And the students that were usually of Latin descent were thrilled because, as many told me at the time, I've never even played a Latin character. They don't exist in capacity as other kinds of characters. There was one young man who actually came from a clown family from Mexico. And it was
Mm.
wonderful because he was so funny without trying. He had it in him. And so these were family of performers that toured in their little makeshift, anything they could find, whether it was cars, sometimes by horse. And they would literally set up a tent in the middle of a farm place, and everybody that lived in the middle of nowhere would come, and they would do political dramas with a lot of funny bits, kind of like Saturday Night Live,
Yeah.
American style in the middle of nowhere.
Well, I love the way you, I mean, you, sounds like it's going to be a really interesting way that you set the stage for this whole story.
Yes.
And I know we have several people from our Power for Parkinson's classes that are hopefully going to join you and come see the play as a group on October 20th, which will be really exciting to experience that. So I think we're kind of at the point where we should probably start to wrap up, but I was wondering if you could, give maybe some, parting words to what you would say to the Parkinson's community, maybe regarding, I know you've both been creative your whole lives. Is there something that keeps you going at this point? Like something that inspires you, that has changed your view as you've moved along?
The dopamine factor for me has always come from art making. And when I disconnected from it, particularly during COVID when we were all isolated, and that's when my symptoms became so pronounced and so ingrained, I was no longer connecting to these places, these venues, these creative opportunities, and I paid a price for that pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So I would strongly recommend that if anyone that's in our community with Parkinson's, that I can honestly vouch for the power of healing that involves creative making, whether you're painting, you're sewing, you're knitting, you're storytelling, you're writing, whatever you're doing, it's going to have a payoff with the parts of our brain that are struggling to reconnect again. And so I can't say enough about how powerful that can be, and to encourage people in any way they can to find that outlet.
Yeah, I think that's great advice.
Well, you know what's beautiful, and this is a nice way to end too, Nina, is that the character, why I threw this idea originally at Artie as the bull, Bull, never had a chance, is because he was such a fan, my main character, of Manolete, who's one of the most famous bullfighters in all of Latin America, that got mauled by a bull and died in the ring. And again, I saw that as a metaphor with the idea that the bull, and in this case, bullshit, never has hands, particularly when you have a good person calling you out on it, as Gus always was. He was so
Right.
smart, quite the genius with his words. And so that's what the play here. So hopefully we weren't too full of bullshit today with with our enthusiasm. But thank you so much for giving us.
Yeah, this was really great. It was really nice talking to both of you, and thanks for sharing all your wisdom. And we're excited. I think the show in Austin starts, is it October 11th? Is it tomorrow?
Yeah, tomorrow, and runs to the 27th, I believe.
Oh, wow. Okay. Fantastic. Well, wishing you the best of luck with this. And I think both of you should be very proud, and we're proud as part of your community. So thank you so much for everything you're doing, and look forward to our to seeing the play, to the musical.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to go with your group as well. I'm going to go Sunday.
Okay.
Like try to go once a week if I can, because I know, having been a professor that trained young artists for so many years, both at the University of Texas and at ACC later and more recently, I know how significant each performance becomes, I mean, the learning process. So I want to see them take those big leaps every week, because I know they will. So.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. I am sure. All right.
All right.
Well, very good. All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Okay.
Scratch that, and
Well, I love where you're going with that.
let's see. Yeah.